You are listening to The Jarrod Thomas Show on News Talk 1310, KNOX.
11:06 here at News Talk 1310 and KNOX. Good morning. My name is Jarrod Thomas. You can also find us on KNOX FM. Go ahead. 107.9 is where you find it. 32 under overcast skies. And joining me is Rob Doar. I believe that's how you say your name. And he is Minnesota Gun Owner Civil Rights Alliance. Good morning, kind sir. How are you?
Doing well, Jarrod. How about yourself?
I am living the dream up here in Grand Forks, North Dakota.
All right.
So, Rob, Mr. Dayton, I think kind of really turned gun owners everywhere off yesterday by vetoing a bill that was certainly on its way to becoming law. Many called it the Shoot First law. Can you take a little time and explain to us exactly what happened yesterday?
Well, it was a bit of a surprise. I was in the audience at the Minnesota Game Fair when in August of 2010, when then candidate Dayton firmly proclaimed that he was a strong supporter of the Second Amendment and also claimed that he will support those rights for law-abiding citizens. So yesterday was definitely a departure from those campaign promises, not that politicians ever lie. But essentially, Dayton just listened to the same prosecutors and the same police officer associations that were proclaiming in 2003 and 2005 when we passed our carry law that there would be blood in the streets and shootouts over parking spaces. And, of course, none of that came true, and he still sought advisement from the same people for some reason.
Do the police in the state of Minnesota have a legitimate concern here, or no? Dave Pachia, who's the executive director of the Police Officers Association, said himself that they are divided among this. So as a bureaucratic process, they do oppose it. But, the author of the House bill is Tony Cornish, who is the chief of police himself. So there's obviously some division in the ranks as far as whether there's a legitimate concern. I work with plenty of police officers. I know plenty of police officers, and not one of them has expressed that they thought that this bill would put them in any sort of danger. Well, and as you know, Dayton cited that as his primary reason, I think, for not doing it. He says when they strongly oppose a measure because they believe it will increase the dangers to them in the performance of their duties, I cannot support it. So he's pointing right back at them, saying he must have heard more from them than he did from folks on the other side of the issue because he decided, well, this isn't a really good idea and vetoed it.
Yeah, anytime you look at any gun bills, the Police Officers Association, the Sheriff's Association, they tend to play to the worst case scenario. They did this with the carry law, the shootouts in the streets and things like that. They imagine the worst possible scenario. And the fact is that, Minnesotans, just like North Dakotans, are good people. We are law-abiding citizens. The people who have carry permits are law-abiding citizens. So the fears that they have of, people being trigger-happy and going after police officers for just being in the yard are just simply unfounded, and they've been unfounded in the 20 states that already have this law.
Dayton also objected to requiring Minnesota to recognize concealed weapon permits from all states, which he said would allow people to carry guns here under the considerably lower standards for the issuance of permits of some other states. Do you agree with that?
Not at all. I mean, North Dakota has a carry permit law, but because your training is slightly different than ours, Minnesota will not recognize North Dakota's residents to carry in our state. And I just think that that's a very firm departure from the Second Amendment. And then if you also just look at a national level, there's a House bill, the 822, which is national carry permit recognition. So that seems to be the direction that most of the country is going. We have full faith and credit. I can drive in North Dakota under my Minnesota driver's license. I don't have to get remarried in North Dakota for you guys to recognize my marriage. It doesn't make any sense that I should have to carry some extra sort of paper from North Dakota in order to exercise my constitutional rights.
What about Dayton's concern that he says allowing anyone to claim that he or she acted reasonably when using deadly force? I guess what I'm trying to get at, or what I'm trying to drive at here, is
Is Dayton completely all wet on this deal, or is there some reason for some of his concern?
That's a really good question. It's hard to differentiate what his personal beliefs are based on his statements versus what his party platform and what his donors and handlers would like him to believe. It's just I have not seen one legitimate argument from anybody in the states that this law currently exists that poses more harm than good. There's always outliers. There's always people who make mistakes. But by and large, the permit holders are even less likely to commit crimes than mayors of the Mayors Against Illegal Guns. It's just we're law-abiding citizens, so it's hard to imagine, and the numbers just aren't there with that to match up with the rhetoric.
The right to self-defense is fundamental. I think you would agree with that.
Yes, sir.
I guess for you, there would be no. I mean, there's no limit to that. I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, everything is subject to is subject to scrutiny, but you have to look at it through a lens of our freedoms. Where does our constitutional freedom allow us to do that? And if you look at the Second Amendment in general and the rest of the Bill of Rights, it is not limiting the powers of the people; it's limiting the powers of the government over the people.
Rob Doar is the name of our guest. He is of the Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance in Minnesota and a guest here on the Jarrod Thomas Show on News Talk 1310 KNOX. 775-5559, 866-KNOX-1310 or email live@knoxradio.com. Do you have a percentage of the amount of police officers in the state of Minnesota that have guns outside, I guess, of work? Are most of them, would you consider to be NRA members and conceal and carry members? And I mean, that's maybe a silly question a little bit because of what they do for a living, but obviously fans of guns and believe in the Second Amendment wholeheartedly.
Right, and actually it's not a silly question at all. I was actually surprised. I do post-training, which is continuing education for police officers, and the vast majority of them are just not gun people. They're not recreational shooters. They're not target shooters. Carrying a gun is just, like carrying a briefcase to a business person. So they don't do a lot of recreational shooting. So that's not that silly of a question. That being said, there are, if you were to compare professions, there are much more people who were recreational shooters that are police officers, people who do carry. And most police officers do carry off duty, and many departments require that they do so.
Reasonably believes was a statement that got a lot of attention when trying to get this bill passed. Your reasonably believes that I'm under serious threat, and my interpretation of believing that I'm of serious threat can be interpreted in two different ways. Do you think that was really
a key part that's missing from there? It's not just the fear of being under a threat; it's the fear of substantial bodily harm or death. So not to the mere fact that you feel threatened, but and the word reasonable actually comes from Minnesota jury instructions being would the average person with what you knew at that time, would they react the same way? That's what reasonable is. So if you reasonably believe that you're in fear of substantial bodily harm, and that's the phrase that the anti-gunners kept missing out on, is they just wanted you to feel threatened. They kept leaving out the substantial bodily harm part.
We have a call here for you. KNOX, hi.
Hey, left-winger here, can't stand the NRA. I don't see any problem with this law change. Under the current law, if I feel threatened, I have the authority and the justification to do what it takes. Under the future law, if this one takes place, it's exactly the same. The concealed carry, the holders of the permits, they should be able to go from state to state with the same laws. That's just the way it should be. This is not some kind of a slippery slope. It's like they're taking a page, the anti-measure. It's like they're taking a page out of the Republican playbook. They're saying scary, everything's scary. The sky will fall if we pass this. That's not accurate. This is a good law, and it should go.
Your thoughts, Rob?
Sounds like a good call to me. Really the only thing that changes with the substantial bodily harm is also the duty to retreat. Right now in Minnesota, if you are outside of your home, you've got the duty to try to escape the situation before defending yourself. And that's just not practical. And that's something that you have to consider, that you have to think about doing when your life is on the line. And I like to say in my carry classes that you've got a few seconds to make a decision that a jury will have 9 months with free room and board to dismantle. And the law should be on the side of the law-abiding, not on the side of the criminals.
So I guess the argument here would be too then, going back to when you mentioned your carry classes, your conceal and carry classes, I don't, I guess, have a huge problem with the Minnesota conceal and carry being good in North Dakota, Virginia, Missouri, or whatever. The only question that I'm curious about, though, should there, I guess one criminal background check is enough then? In other words, what I'm concerned about, maybe this goes on and maybe it doesn't, but is there a huge counterfeit sort of organization that's out there that is getting these conceal and carry permits passed, and these guys are walking around that shouldn't be with conceal and carry weapons?
No, I've never heard of that, of a counterfeit permit to carry card or anything like that being the case. We're in the digital age now, so all it would take is a call to dispatch and a couple phone numbers to verify any of that information. Worst case scenario, if they can't even just do it right there on their own computer in the squad car.
Yeah, one of the other things that apparently police were saying throughout this debate, which evidently kind of sat with Dayton in a way that allowed him to veto this, was police were saying that Minnesota recognizes weapon permits by any state. It would make it harder for police to temporarily remove guns from volatile domestic situations. Why would that be? What is the argument there?
I don't think that was the actual their connecting line. There was another part of the bill that prevented the seizure of guns unless they were being seized as evidence or the person was arrested. So I think that was the line that they were drawing there. Currently, police officers can go and take somebody's property without following the evidentiary protocols and indefinitely keep their firearms or their property. And I think Senator Hoffman on the Senate floor hit on a very key point. She was saying, well, if you're leaving the person that is a threat there, the tool doesn't matter. The threat is still there. So if you're going to be seizing the gun, you should also be seizing the person.
Well, I guess it's interesting because I, like you, had been following this. We had one of our local Minnesota police chiefs on, and Mr. Hetland over in East Grand Forks, and
okay, yep.
And he was admittedly a little bit, I don't think conflicted is the right word. He wanted to be careful with how he fell on this. In part, he admitted on the air that he's an NRA member, and he certainly is a believer in the Second Amendment, and he knows that it's very key to what he does in his profession. But he also said that he thought that maybe there was a little bit of a danger here moving forward. But like you said, what's interesting is that there's a lot of statistics out there that just don't back that up. So what do you base that sort of fear on, if you will? What do you base this idea that if we allow all these folks to if we broaden it a bit, what makes you think that all of a sudden it's going to be the wild, wild west in Minnesota? And the answer to that, of course, is that it's just not there.
It's just not there. We've asked the same question, and they'll pull random statistics. One scenario from one state, one time, and use that to try to debunk the whole bill. But the fact is that if you do that with anything, we would have no rights at all. If you were to take any right that's abused ever and use it to limit that right, we would be living in a communist country. It's just insane to try to use such minute instances to characterize a people as a whole.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point, and one that needs to be made over and over. There is some talk that there's enough support for an override. What are you hearing? Is that going to be the case?
The GOP hasn't made that determination yet. There are some outstate Democrats that have a wide support of gun owners. So there is potential that enough of them could be swayed, but the GOP hasn't even made the determination whether they're going to go that route. And they know that election's just 9 months away. So I'd love to see them go and try to get everybody on the record firmly.
KNOX, hi.
Hi. Hello.
Hello. You have a question?
Well, right now there's a blue law in Minnesota that you can carry a loaded weapon down the street.
Okay.
I just wondering what's the difference between that law and the law that's trying to pass?
So do you understand the question, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, the carry law does exist right now. This is just adding some clarification, some things that have come up in case law, some things that we've seen in other states that we believe our residents are entitled to the same protections of. So that's what we're trying to do with this bill. We were, kind of latecomers to the shall issue game, but now we're trying to catch up with getting Minnesotans' rights in lines with that for people in other states, and that which we feel is constitutionally guaranteed to us.
All right. Rob Doar, thank you very much for your time this morning, sir. As always, I do appreciate it.
Thanks, JT. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, Rob Doar, he, of course, of the Minnesota Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance, and a guest here on the Jarrod Thomas Show on News Talk 1310 KNOX. And hey, I think most of you, if you listen to this for any length of time, is it a bad idea? I don't think it's a bad idea. But what I was curious about, and it was interesting as they went through the process and they talked about the Castle Doctrine, my thought was the Castle Doctrine already covered a lot of this stuff. And what we found out was, well, it does, but it also broadens to things like patios, to decks, it just really takes the self-defense aspect of what it is that what you would want to do to protect yourself and expands it. And I think you heard Rob Doar of the Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance say just that. I'm Jarrod Thomas. This is the Jarrod Thomas Show. You're listening to it on News Talk 1310 KNOX and KNOX FM 107.9. It is 32 under a mixed bag of both clouds and sun. 41 is the afternoon high, 17 tonight and 27 tomorrow. Your email is coming up next. News from Doug Barrett out of the award-winning KNOX Newsroom is coming up at the bottom of the hour. Good morning.
Welcome to this Twins Territory Update. Stop.